gentle listener, and welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the podcast for lovers of dark matter, or more specifically, horror fiction. This episode, we present the concluding chapter of our two-part presentation of The Sin Eater by Colin Harker. If you haven't listened to part 1, you should probably do so first. If you have, well, bon appetit. Don't worry, he said. It's cooler up here. You'll see. He opened the door that led to the 10th floor, and I felt a rush of air against my face like a breeze from the sea. But it wasn't the sea. My voice echoed like the cry of a lost bird. Jesus Christ! Merrick, what are you doing up here? I told you. You'll see. I'll give you a demonstration. I was only half listening to him, my gaze taking in the utter strangeness of the 10th floor of the factory tower. It was a single room, large as a stadium, made of black, cream, and crimson-colored marble from floor to ceiling. Except for the perimeter of the room, which formed a sort of slippery walkway, the room was an immense indoor pool, the waters reflecting the colored marble. In the center of that shadowy, tranquil pool, I saw a chair. There were various wires attached to it, long and black like highway power lines, extending from the high ceiling to a web-like cap at its back. There was something that plastic webbing reminded me of, and I stepped forward, wanting a better look. But Merrick held me back with a hiss. I felt him fumbling around my belt, then unclipping my handcuffs before clumsily cuffing me to the iron railing that overlooked the pool. My temples throbbed with a dull, frustrated tension. I caught a glimpse of one of those geishas a few yards away, leaning against the marble wall, smiling emptily at me. I started. "What is that thing doing here?" I demanded, hoping to God my voice wasn't shaking. "They're scattered all over the place." Merrick gave a faint laugh. "I guess the Dawson Corporation didn't bother cleaning up, since they knew the whole building would be demolished eventually anyway. Can you believe it? They actually constructed this entire pool area for the geishas to exercise their artificial muscles and to demonstrate that they were waterproof. Pretty wild, huh?" He rubbed my shoulders then, the creep, as though I was some skittish cult, setting my nerves on edge all the more. "Calm down, officer. There's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, you may learn to enjoy this too, before the evening's out." It's strange how one peculiar choice in wording can have the effect of coloring an entire sentiment. Merrick's insipid reassurances would have been merely cloying had he not dropped that strange word. Enjoy. And even worse, the idea that I would share in whatever his enjoyments were. I swallowed the loathing that I felt returning. "You seem fairly confident that I won't take action against you after tonight." "Oh, I am confident. Didn't I tell you that you'd enjoy yourself, too?" He was facing me now, and I thought I caught the faintest glint of grim relish in his eyes. The cunning wretch had caught my instinctive flinching at that word and was now deliberately repeating it to prod the same response out of me again. I simply returned his amused look with a stony one of my own, saying, "Why don't you show me what you're up to, Merrick, before I die of old age? Unless that's your plan." "Not likely. Did you know that statistically in your line of work, you have a 30% chance of dying from a bullet or knife wound?" I shrugged, unimpressed. "Here's another statistic that I bet you didn't know. Did you know that the chance of contracting a stress-related illness in my line of work is 60%? And there's an 8% chance that said illness will be directly linked to mortality. You've been listening to too many morning talk shows, I said. He was shivering a little. There was now a mournful color to his look of giddy joy. His voice was still steady, sane, but I was growing more and more convinced that the man before me was utterly insane. Did Rosette know? I wondered. Was that why she'd earnestly pleaded with him to consider my offer of a job transfer? Merrick had left me handcuffed to the railing. He was now wading into the pool, the water soaking and darkening his pants up to the thighs, dragging his coat with its inexorable weight. As I watched him heave himself deeper into the pool and felt the glowing eyes of the geishas, their plastic legs dangling into the pool as they sat on their marble ledges, I felt the first pang of true panic. Convulsively struggling against the cuffs, I cried, "Oh, for God's sake, Merrick, you're not going to kill yourself right now and leave me like this, are you?" He turned back to look at me. His eyes were still gleaming with that uncanny and yet oddly sober light. "Of course not," he said, a little surprised. "I told you I found the solution to my problem. I'm about to show it to you." He was chest-deep in the water by the time he reached the chair in the center of the pool. "A lifeguard lookout," he panted. "Imagine guarding the lives of things that aren't even alive. Tell me, have you heard of survivor's guilt, officer?" I twisted a little against the railing, trying to reduce the biting cut of the handcuffs. Sure, of course, it's the guilt felt by victims of a trauma who survive but know that others didn't share their luck." "Right." He was hoisting himself up on the concrete lifeguard platform. "I used to wonder how anyone could feel guilt for their own survival. Now I know." He was panting, dripping at the foot of the chair, his eyes bright as he rested his head close to the coiled wires that dangled from the chair like willowy tentacles. "What do you think you know, Merrick?" I asked. I'd managed to ease the cold bite of the cuffs and was now gingerly testing them to see how tight their grip on my wrists truly was. Ordinarily, it would have been impossible to escape them, but the chill perspiration that had covered me when I'd thought for a brief, awful moment that Merrick was going to off himself and leave me in that wet marble tomb had given my wrists the slick freedom to begin worming agonizingly loose. My hope was that Merrick's crazy talk would distract him from my attempts. "It's not surviving the horror that really torments me," he said. "It's the feeling of powerlessness, ignorance, of not fully understanding what I'm seeing, much less preventing it from happening. Don't you get it?" His intense eyes now fixed on me as he stood by the chair. I paused in my attempt to extricate myself. "No," I said, "I don't get it. By watching those videos, the murders, the abuse, you can report it to people like me and you help us catch the felons. You don't think that means something? You don't think that's power?" "A kind of power, sure. A kind that's powerless, however, to ease my special brand of torment. Do you know what I think of every time I watch those videos, officer?" "What?" I asked, tense and therefore somewhat brisk. It wasn't just Merrick's pale-eyed stare that was unnerving me. It was something deep inside me, some grim intuition that told me I did not want to hear his answer, did not want to understand his wisdom or what it was that had compelled him, like some tormented lemming, to this echoing place. But he was talking. His words could not be prevented, nor the haunted obsession from which they welled. He was sitting in the chair now, his face in profile, turned askance from me. I wonder, what does it feel like? What is that ineffable experience of having a face, my face, caved in by a lead pipe? Of being beaten, dismembered while still breathing with a camera catching your every last breath? He leaned back against the chair, against the bird's nest coil of wires at his head. What does it feel like to have 1,000 nails driven into your arm? Something in his last remark triggered a memory in me of a familiar atrocity, and a revelation came to me then. The video you saw, the one that finally broke you, I said. It had to do with one of those geishas, didn't it? That's what brought you here. Here of all places. Merrick's laugh sounded like an awful, choking gasp. You could say that. They were imaginative creatures, weren't they? They knew us. The soulmate algorithm, I said steadily, was simply a gruesome technological malfunction. They didn't know anything. They had no imagination. They were circuits and wires that came in the shape of a human. You're right. They didn't have any imagination or knowledge of their own. We gave them that. Anyway, you came here to see how I managed to relieve my tension. Let me show you how. It was when he began pulling the webbing of wires down upon his head that I realized what he had hooked up to the lifeguard's chair, and why it had seemed so horribly familiar. It was the same sort of Dreamweb headset that I used every night that gave me such visions. I finally noticed the little black box at the foot of the chair, the one with the screens and knobs, identical to the one I had, in which every night I would program my latest cherished reverie, usually of Rosette. But Merrick had Rosette. Damn him. Then what was he using the Dreamweb for? I know what it's like now, officer, he said dreamily. And it's not so bad. Not so bad at all. It's not as bad as I imagined it, or as you perhaps imagined it. I thought it would be like the tortures of the damned, but the adrenaline sharpens and then numbs you, anesthetizes your senses. He never really suffered. Who? I asked, baffled. The man whose wrists and arms were nailed to the kitchen floor by his geisha. You didn't know? The creature, the robot, uploaded the whole thing online. It was viral for a full hour before I saw it and took it down. I think it thought that we would want to watch. I thought I couldn't imagine that kind of pain. The idea gnawed at me, made me feel this weird, helpless guilt. Oh, officer, you would laugh at me if you knew how much I built up every crime, every atrocity that I witnessed. But now I know what they're like. They're like nothing. Did you know that most victims of stabbing don't even realize that they've been stabbed? It feels like a gut punch, like a blow from a bully in a playground. And then nothing. So they die. Well, brother, we're all going to die. I'd worked one of my hands free just as Merrick began to bring the dream webbing over his head, the clear electrodes adhering to his skull and face like clammy circular fingertips. As he pressed the button that turned the dream web on, the clear, creamy implants began to glow a bluish color, the phosphorus lights of a deep-sea predator. His lips drew back from his teeth in an unconscious rictus of anticipation, though whether his grimace was one of ecstasy or horror, I could not tell. Nor did I really care. I was working to free my other hand, and I was doing so with such panicked intent that it was only after a few minutes that I noticed something peculiar about Merrick. He wasn't just attached to the dream web through the electrodes at his forehead. He'd actually attached other implants to his forearms and throat. Intravenous implants from which trickles of blood had started to flow, and his skin to flush. What the hell was he doing? Whatever it was, it had a marked physical effect on him. He seemed like a man in the throes of a violent dream, his lips now tightening and compressing. I could not tell if it was the shadows of that marbled room or the water that surrounded him, but I thought that I saw red welts rise along his arms, and his blood swell as though something invisible had breached his flesh, and his blood was flowing sympathetically to that breach. The cuff at my other wrist was beginning to loosen. Clenching my teeth, I worked, trying to fight past the pain of the effort. I felt that I nearly had it, and oh, how Merrick would pay for this indignity when I had freed myself. I had had little love for him before. Now my aversion to him had deepened to contempt. My jealousy at his having Rosette had caused me to feel something close to a grudging respect for his success. Now that I saw him in that chair, sweating and flushing, I saw him now as nothing more than an abject sensualist. I had to half turn away from him to get in the proper angle to work myself free. Just as I felt the cold metal blessedly slip away from my wrist, Merrick's voice called me back to him, and I turned, trying to conceal my freedom by keeping my hands against the railing. He was pulling away the contacts at his forehead. When he pulled those other strange implants from his forearms and throat, I saw trickling blood left in the wake of their kisses. Holding the gun that he had taken from me, he began wading towards me. And as he did, I thought that I saw his arms and hands covered with the welts of many wounds, as though the suffering that had entered his eyes had surfaced on his flesh. There was something terrifying about that sight. It made no sense. I couldn't comprehend it. What kind of technology had allowed him to actually feel what was in his imagination? I can feed your body adrenaline and electricity, too, he panted, and as he drew nearer, I saw that the shadows had played tricks on my mind. His skin was only faintly marbled, with a few hectic flushes of color. I want you to feel what I feel. Not a chance, I said, flinching at the pistol pressing against me. But he was already fumbling behind my back for my wrists, and discovered that I had unlocked myself. A little too late for your escape, I'm afraid. He said, you'll have to have a taste. After all. I wrenched free from him and hit him in the face. It was a good, solid blow, and hard enough to surprise him into dropping the pistol. I felt my spirits rise as I heard it clatter heavily to the concrete and saw the thick blood pouring from his nose. My mistake was in stooping to retrieve the pistol. Merrick was not as stunned by my retaliation as I'd assumed, and a vicious reflex caused him to kick out at me. Unbalanced, I was thrown backward and fell into the pool. However, managing to have the sense to cling to the marble, keeping my head above the water, I caught Merrick by the boot, tripping him. But he was already fumbling for the pistol and caught me by the hair before thrashing me with the butt of the pistol again and again across the face. I tried to escape the pain, to shake his clenched grip. But I was helpless, half submerged in the pool. And when he gave me a particularly brutal blow to the chin, I felt all the strength and will in me leave with a frightening suddenness. I would have drowned, but Merrick held me above the water, my cheek grazing its surface, one arm brutishly wrapped around my chest, the other still clenched tightly in my hair. All thought is feeling, and all feeling thought. He whispered, "Oh, I understand. Oh, I empathize with your pain. Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. Meaningless. Meaningless! Feel what I feel, officer, and in feeling, know me. You aren't my first choice for a companion, but a man in my condition can't be choosy, can he?" I saw the blood from my face fall like dark tears into the water as I was dragged to the chair, too broken still to resist. He lifted himself up, dragging me, thrashing along with him, setting me upright against its black upholstery. "You don't have to do this," I said softly, my forehead slippery with blood as he set the dream webbing against my temples like a ghastly coronet. "Oh, yes. Yes, I do," he said, holding the long implants like a snake handler with their silver, glistening needles attached, and carefully driving them into my unguarded flesh. I was lost in a haze of suffering and violation. I do not believe that I ever hated so deeply as I hated Merrick at that moment. He saw the hatred in my eyes and shook his head. He was still convinced that in mere moments we would be the same, he and I. One thought, one feeling. That confidence in him I hated most of all. "You will thank me, officer," he said, kneeling at my feet to adjust the control box. I noticed for the first time that the black cables that ran from the chair were connected to the geishas that sat upon the edge of the pool, their long legs dangling. That was how we powered the Dreamweb, with their reserved energy stored in batteries and chips located in their plastic tendons, their hollow hearts, and their metal brains. What other energy in them, though, had he wittingly or unwittingly drawn upon? Merrick looked me in the eyes, almost tenderly, his pistol held against my breast. "Say farewell to terror," he said. And as he flicked the switch, I saw the geisha's eyelashes flutter and their doll's eyes flicker and glow as my own body arched and convulsed, and I went under into a profounder, lucid dreaming than any I'd ever previously known. In terms of sheer feeling, it was much like the sensation of unreality that I had when I indulged in my own dreamweb fantasies, that eerie knowledge of dreaming with all the sensual sensitivity of wakefulness. I felt the sensations of two separate worlds. There was the aching throb of the intravenous implants in my throat and arms as they began to send what felt like short electrical shocks through me. There was my own cooling blood on my face. And then there was the dreamweb sensations. The feeling that I was walking into a living room, that it was nearly nightfall, but that the last rays of the evening illumined the world with crimson gold, and that I was waiting for something or someone. Then I saw her. The cropped blonde hair, the violet eyes, the thin smile. I thought at first that it was the murderous geisha from the crime files, the one whose soulmate algorithm had given her that monstrous intuition. Then I realized my mistake. The hair and color of the eyes were the same, but the smile and the shape of the eyes themselves were rosettes. She was holding the nail gun at the level of her thigh, the way you might hold a heavy bouquet in the act of offering it. And her smile, Rosette's smile, was an awful echo of Merrick's in its inexorable eagerness to please me. No, I backed away in the dream. I wasn't afraid of death, of course. How could I be? But I was desperately afraid of the pain. I knew, after all, what was coming. With all my heart, I cursed Merrick. But my hatred was useless. Hooked as I was to the batteries of the geisha dolls, feeling the pulsing shock of electricity in my blood. I had no time to think, for the dream girl was using the nail gun to push me roughly against the wall. It was eerie how the dream web manipulated my nerves, making every sensation feel so real. As she drew closer, I could feel everything with the breathtaking vividness of reality. The gun pressing against the pit of my stomach like a cold erection. The brush of her synthetic breath against my cheek. It smelled of oiled metal and roses. The kiss that she placed on my lips, more tender than erotic. And I knew as I tried to push her away and she caught me by the wrist, pushing my arm back against the wall. I knew as the nail gun suddenly rose, leveling with my wrist, helpless in her hand, that I would feel this living death as reality, too. Make it stop, Merrick! I hissed through clenched teeth, and then shouted, "For God's sake, make it stop!" The soft clicks of the trigger, the sudden, incessant driving of nails, metal clustering in my flesh, breaking the small bones at my wrist and opening up the ropey arteries, all building to a maddening pain that demanded an escape where there was none. Oh, and the most sickening sound of all, the warm flood of blood that began to fall in thick spurts to the floor, like the slippery spilling in a charnel house. I could still feel the electrical intravenous implants at my throat and my wrists, my other reality. Was it my imagination, or had the shock impulses there quickened, as though to match the rush of adrenaline that was flowing through me in response to my nightmare? What energy was Merrick pouring into me? The sudden rush of adrenaline in my body was beginning to dull the pain, but the little shocks seemed to stimulate my nerves again. The dream geisha tilted her head, beautifully curious. Merrick watched me, standing somewhere above me, and I felt a dizzying wave of agony again as the electrical impulses forced my nerves to attention. But just as the agony became too unbearable, I felt a hot wave of numbing adrenaline flow through me. Not just in response to my body's belief that it was dying, but stronger to counteract the shocks of electrical torment. I felt my face flush for the first time with a discomforting warmth. the first hint that my body had been tipped toward an endorphin rush. Oh, Merrick, what have you done to yourself? What are you doing to me? I endured the geisha's nailing for as long as her original victim had suffered, as it turns out. 4 long hours. As I died in the dream, I was hurried on to another dream, another atrocity of Merrick's making or memory. Here I had to endure a fairly provincial murder. I was gutted against a brick wall. A part of my brain could imagine the case file report. Defensive wounds from when he put his hands out to push away his murderer's face, only to have his fingers slashed at. A scuff from where the victim began to slip and falter in his own blood. The precise moment when he began to go into shock and bleed to death. Yet, even more horrible, those awful electric impulses continued to pour their devilish energy in me. I hated the sharp thrill of adrenaline and the numbing warmth that followed with it. And I hated that my body seemed to enjoy it. For I knew that these were the pleasures that Merrick had created for himself, and that had clearly driven him utterly mad. I wanted no part in this debauched sympathy. The body's nerves were never meant to feel this special spill of adrenaline, this chemical reaction in response to its own death. Again and again and again. It was utterly ghoulish. In his morbid desire to understand the atrocities that he had witnessed, Merrick had discovered how to recreate the flesh's chemical responses to imminent, violent death, and heighten them tenfold. The poor sick bastard had turned himself into a death-throw junkie. I would have laughed aloud had I not been a little distracted by being beaten to death on a wharf. I lost track of how many times I was murdered. It was always a violent death. It had to be violent, you see, not only to appease Merrick's conscience, but also to stimulate the death-throw adrenaline. I'd begun to lose all sense of reality, my body burning and flushed, simply a locus of eternal sensation. When Merrick at last withdrew the intravenous implants from me and removed the dream web, I was so overwhelmed by the deprivation that I thought I had truly died. He splashed my face with water, forcing me to come to, and bent closer, whispering, "How do you feel?" I tried to reply, but I was shuddering so violently that I couldn't speak. "Now you know what it's like," he said. He was watching me, his face alight with all the eagerness of a child. I saw the blood trailing down my arm, felt it trickle warmly down my throat. "It's really not so bad, is it? Murder, I mean." "No," I lied softly. Now that the high was wearing off, I felt the tears begin to fall helplessly down my cheeks. "I wept too the first time," he said. "And then I had to do it again. You understand, of course, now that you've felt it. You think I felt what you felt. Of course you did. I saw you, didn't I?" I hated him for that little smile as he voiced that last remark. I struggled to stand, but I felt a sudden dizziness, and I faltered. Merrick caught me eagerly. He thought of me as his companion now, He no longer saw in me an officer of the law. There was nothing that he feared from me anymore, now that I had tasted his joys. In his eyes I had lost all power. I shared his state. I pulled back and looked into his eyes. There was something there of the haunted, stricken grief that I had seen during our first meeting at the Delphine Club. But there was also that nauseating eagerness. How much time had he spent in the company of these plastic geishas, I wondered, as he tinkered with their batteries in the dream web, creating this perfect simulacrum of murder. I couldn't tell Rosehead. It would be too dangerous. That's why I needed you, Conway. You see, if she knew, if she even sensed what I've done, and that I need this, she would... The loud report of the gun put a stop to all his speculations. He looked down at the blood that began to spurt thickly from the wound now gaping in his stomach, then at me, and the gun, my gun, that I'd lifted from his belt while he held me. How does it feel now, Merrick? Enjoying yourself? He tried to catch me by the throat, but I shoved him violently away, causing him to stumble and fall. As much as I loathed him, I did not watch as he bled out in the swimming pool. I listened to the water churn for a time, watched the widening spill of crimson, and then there was only silence and the faint hum of electricity. When I turned around, I had my last and final shock. Merrick, floating face up, a contorted grin on his face. His eyes were bright, but glazed, staring sightlessly towards the marble ceiling. I guess I had a pretty good idea of what he had felt towards the end. I hurled everything into the water, the dream web, the intravenous electrical implants, all of it, listening to it spark, sizzle, and die. It would have been inconceivable to Merrick that someone who had tasted in equal measure the unholy pleasures that he had tasted would not wish to revisit them. That was Merrick's mistake, you see. He believed that feeling was thought, and thought feeling. He believed that if he felt what those murder victims felt, that he could diminish the atrocity by understanding it. And he believed that if he made me feel what he felt, that we would essentially share the same thought. He was too supremely naive to realize the subtleties of individual experience, to realize that I could at once experience the pleasures that he felt and feel hatred and disgust for them. He was, as I had long suspected, childishly weak at heart. That sensual leer on his face was nature's fitting death mask for him. I made certain that I left no trace of myself in that wretched place. It would be better if Merrick's death was seen as a violent, nameless crime. Better if my name was not connected with it, even if I had a decent chance of clearing my name and proving that his death was an act of self-defense. I'd found that the court of justice, so-called, could be a little sloppy. The night was still clear and surprisingly still young, though it had felt as though I had lived the whole night in the dream web. In reality, only 2 hours had passed. The stars were clear and bright in the firmament. They caught and dazzled in the silver of the Court of Justice insignia at my breast. The reflected light filled me with a sharp longing. The memory of something that I meant to claim. Now, I did not, as a result, drive to my apartment, but instead pulled up in front of Merrick's apartment. I knew she would be there. The light was still on in the third-story apartment. She had waited up for him, I realized. When she answered the door and saw that it was me instead of Merrick, her look of expectation turned to blank surprise. "Officer Conway?" she said, and then hesitated as I entered, seeing my face. "It's about Merrick, isn't it?" "He was a sick man," I said softly. "He was fascinated with death, you see. I couldn't keep him from it." "He killed himself?" "In a way, yes. He attacked me and I was forced to defend myself." Her lip trembled. "Have you reported it?" "No. And if I were you, I would say very little as well. You know how these investigations, particularly if they involve the death of a court of justice agent, can become messy. Tomorrow morning I'll report that my gun was stolen, and they'll assume that it was a suicide. In a way, it was. Of course." I felt her relax as I took her by the shoulders, felt her lean against me, her breath catching. It was so uncannily similar to the moments with her that I had imagined in the dream web. The same breathless press against me, the same timid kiss against my throat, that it left me with a peculiar sense of déjà vu, as well as pleasure. "Thank you for coming here and telling me in person. I know that you did all you could to help him." She drew in another shuddering breath. As my fingers relaxed upon her shoulder, she suddenly lifted her face and kissed me full on the mouth. The press was light but unmistakably sensual. It could not be mistaken as an invitation for mere companionship. "Oh, I'm sorry," she whispered, sensing the surprise in my silence. "It's just that with Merrick gone so many nights." She hesitated, then said, "Your heart is beating so fast." My senses had not yet recovered from Merrick's murderous dreamweb visions, but of course there was no reason to tell her that. I leaned down, returning her kiss, feeling her clench her fingers around my collar. The streetlights shone into the darkened apartment, illuminating her eyes as she drew back. Her eyes gleamed with a golden, glassy, feral look. For a moment, the briefest moment, it was very like the look that I'd seen in the eyes of those things in Merrick's dark marble tomb miles away in the Dawson factory. I remembered his last words. I couldn't tell Rosette. It would be too dangerous. The next moment she blinked and it was gone, her eyes soft and hazel, and I shivered at my own whispering fancy. "Don't worry, officer," she smiled, kissing my cheek. "I think I know exactly what you want." is in EATER. Or do you feel like I feel? By Colin Harker. Colin Harker is a scholar, author, and screenwriter of horror, with a particular predilection for cosmic horror and dark fantasy. Her award-winning gothic horror novel, The Feast of the Innocents, which unites the charismatic, scheming villains and chilling atmosphere of classic gothic horror with visceral supernatural terrors and historical intrigue, has received lavish praise from fans of the genre. If you count yourself in that number, you may like to check it out. It could be right up your alley. That's The Feast of the Innocents by Colin Harker. Now, before we leave you, a reminder that we have relaunched our long-hibernating Nocturnal Transmissions YouTube channel. All the video clip versions of the episodes we produce for our Spotify friends also get posted there, so all can enjoy. If you feel in the mood for a little visual stimulation to accompany your listening experience, just pop on over to YouTube and have at it. You have been listening to Nocturnal Transmissions, dark tales both old and new, performed by your humble narrator, Kristin Holland. Our show is made possible thanks to the support of our Patreon subscribers. We would like to extend a very big thank you to the highest ranked amongst our Patreon subscribers, our cohorts. Daniel Kamiankowski, Jerry Taylor, Johnny Kelly, Rebecca Gates, Heathen Soul, Amanda Moore, Fangora Brown, Boole Swiftney, Jimmy Mack, Drenny, Tim Howard, Alex Brewis, Doug Standish, Rachel Brown, Kel Wielden, Wayne Prince, Robert Troy Hampton Peterson, Tippy Polo, and Evan Dooley. Until next we meet, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone, especially yourself. Good night, gentle listener.
Good night, good night. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, good night. I'll see you with the dawning. Sunshine will change the night today. Shadows will all be chased away. It's no